Good afternoon, Twitter. I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of further elaborate or further talk about a concept that is, I hate to say it because it appears to be gaining some momentum in social media. And this is the concept of national divorce, which has been highly promoted by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. In retrospect, looking at what's been said, I don't think that Representative Greene has actually looked at all the logistics that are involved to be able to implement a concept such as national divorce. Upon looking at the makeup of how our governments are structured in our states, for example, take my state of Texas. We have a Republican state government, but the government in the local cities and counties, and I'm talking about major cities and counties in my state, are all Democratic. So there would have to be a degree of logistics to handle this particular scenario. And I would think and believe that in other states, like the Democratic or states with Democratic governments, there might be major cities and counties that their governments are Republican. I don't know if that's the case, but I would think if it's one way, like in Texas is one way, in other states it would be the opposite. Now, with Texas, also, here's an interesting thing. Our state capital, Austin, Texas, is Democratic. Travis County, which I believe is the county that Austin is situated in, is Democratic. So you've got a state government that is Republican with a Democratic capital as their seat of government, where the state capital is at. So I wouldn't wonder what the logistics are or would be to deal with that type of scenario. And I'm wondering if Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has even thought about these minor yet crucial logistics. She's a proponent of, and she is basically promoting the concept of national divorce. But I would believe if, as Americans, those of us that might be inclined to consider the concept, we would need to know an exact clear picture of what this representative is proposing, as far as in these minor details. I would think with any type of major concept such as this, there has to be a certain degree of impartiality between Democratic governments and Republican governments because of what's involved in creating these two distinct groups of states, your Republican states and your Democratic states. What are the logistics in reality to facilitate this type of concept on a local level? These are questions that Marjorie Taylor Greene needs to answer, because Americans, if she wants Americans to consider this, then she needs to explain herself. Now, here's another interesting situation also of another type of logistics that I believe Marjorie Taylor Greene needs to consider. When you're talking about any type of restructuring of the government, which in this case is separating the two Democratic parties, you got to understand you're not only affecting the lives of Americans as well, but you're affecting basically the entire structure of government in general throughout the country. You're affecting the districting for elections, because if you're going to start moving cities from one location to the other simply because of their political party, then that affects the total structure of the districting and the for the elections or the future elections of our country and on the local level. You know, that's a logistic in itself. I mean, you're basically subjecting each and every state to a mass redistricting protocol. I mean, what are the logistics that are involved for that? And also, in those logistics, you have to take into account state laws on elections. So you're basically, and in that in itself, you're talking about basically restructuring state laws to accommodate this giant concept of national divorce. And then also, in that same logistics, you have to take into account that a lot of governments, that type of maneuver has to be set in their state constitutions, which in a lot of states requires a referendum. The citizens themselves have to vote. So basically, what I'm getting at, Representative Greene, is that if you're trying to implement a concept such as this, you need to think out and you need to have planned out in writing and written format all these logistics that are involved in planning this type of maneuver of concept to bring it to fruition. And I think as Americans, primarily for us, we need to know what those logistics are if you're to convince Americans to accept the reality or accept the concept that you're proposing of national divorce. Your colleagues in Congress, both House and Senate, need to see those logistics to be able to understand what you're proposing and come into agreement with you if your goal is to get them in agreement to do this. Another thing that you need to consider in the type of logistics is how to achieve what's called ratification between all the states, because anytime you do something like this, it has to be in accordance with the Constitution. And I know in the Constitution there's got to be laws that forbid this or that prohibit it. So in order to make this work, there has to be ratification of 2/3 of the states. So to do that, you have to have the logistics down and have a convincing argument that all states, all congressmen, all representatives, all senators are in agreement, all state governments are in agreement to be able to achieve this. Do you have all those logistics covered? That's the question, and I think that's what all Americans and all politicians that are hearing you talk about this want to know and want to understand. Do you have these logistics already finalized, or do you have it at least in writing to where you can show everybody what you're trying to do? I mean, it's easy to go and say, okay, let's divide everybody into red and blue states. But if you do not have the logistics involved to do such a thing, don't go. You shouldn't even go mentioning it, to be honest. I mean, I'm assuming you have some set of logistics, but do you have all the logistics involved to achieve a concept such as this? That's my question, and I believe as American citizens, as Americans of this great country, we deserve the right to know. Who knows? You might make us change our mind and take your side on it. I don't know. I mean, personally, myself, for the moment, I believe that it's not a wise concept because it kind of looks like we're going back to our Civil War nature, and I don't think as Americans we want to do that. But who knows? Once we have a clear picture of what we're looking at, we might change our minds. I mean, I don't know. The ball is in your court, Representative Greene, and I would hope to hear you respond to this on your Twitter or on your social media and provide us the clear picture, the clear logistics that are involved in completing a task such as this. Until then, as Americans, we'll be eagerly awaiting to see what your response is going to be. Thank you for your time.